All right, we're go. Welcome everybody to YAMLScript, scripting in YAML. My name is Ingy.net, and has everybody got their singing voices on? Mine's a little raspy actually, but me. All right, let's go. So, who knows 99 bottles of Perl? Yeah, well, if you don't know it, I wrote a little program that will print the lyrics. So let's see. You know, that's too much Perl. I'm sorry, I just can't handle that much Perl. Let's cut it down. We can do 3 bottles. All right, everybody. 3 bottles of Perl on the wall. 3 bottles of Perl. Take one down, slurp it around. 2 bottles of Perl on the wall. 2 bottles of Perl on the wall. 2 bottles of Perl. Take one down, slurp it around. 1 bottle of beer on the wall, and there's 1 bottle of beer on 1 bottle of Perl beer. Take one down, slurp it around. No more bottles of Perl on the wall. All right, that's enough of that. Yeah, so let's look at this program that I wrote. Okay, this is your first YAMLScript program. And you look through, it's got a hash bang, it's got a main function, takes a parameter number, defaults to 99, loops through those, says a paragraph for each of those numbers. The paragraph is kind of cool because it's like a here document, right? But it has interpolation, but functional interpolation, so you can easily call another function, bottles down here with the number that you were passed in, that kind of stuff. Down here you have basically a switch statement. So that's, we'll cover more of that later. Okay, so if I compile this, it turns into a different language. That language is called Clojure. Clojure is a Lisp that was originally written for the JVM. But don't get scared and don't walk out because it's not gonna be scary. All right, and let's look at these side by side. I know which one I like better. Anyway, it's okay. So, introducing YAMLScript. It's a new programming language, and I've been talking about writing a new programming language for years, and it's like I always false start it and get a nice talk demo, but this is a real thing. I've been working on it nonstop for the last year. It's been a real thing since Christmas, and I write programs in it now. There's always more to do, right? But it's fully available, super easy to install. I'll show you how to do that in a second. And fast. We could run a couple of, I hope it's going to be fast. What do we got? Everything's under 50 milliseconds except for one guy. This is not quite the output I was expecting. Just 1 second, please. I'm going to do a little hacking in the background. Did I leave something in there? I was playing around with a little bug and I added this little thing and I think it's messing up stuff. So let's try it again. There we go. Okay, so 14 milliseconds. We could run it a couple times, different speeds, but under 50. Perl, plenty faster, so slower sometimes. Raku, still reasonably fast, but over 100 milliseconds. We can go to Ruby, Node, Python. Anyway, it's as fast as all these dynamic languages, and it is a dynamic language. It has a complete standard library, a huge one, probably over 1,000 ready-to-use functions built in, and a full ecosystem like a CPAN, the whole Clojure Java ecosystem. All of the programs are 100% YAML based. I mean, it's actual, literally YAML syntax that you saw there. It has to be. Part of the compilers and off-the-shelf YAML parsers, we'll see. And I already said it compiles to Clojure modem Lisp, but it has no execution by default. So the cool thing is all of your current YAML files out there, it embeds nicely into YAML, and all of your current YAML files are valid YAMLScript. And YAMLScript, I want to be the best YAML loader for you to use in Perl and Raku and what other languages you use YAML from. It's also a standalone language, so my next talk is going to be using it from Perl and Raku and other languages. This one's about using it as a programming language. So One thing it does is actually program. You can take a one-liner actually and program it to a binary executable. I'll show that later. Blazingly fast, and you're not shipping source code if you don't want to. We got it compiling to C++. That's still not rolled out, but it works kind of. And oh, so I'm sorry. This slide was about YS, the command line interpreter, and this is what it does. It runs your programs. It also loads your YAMLScript files to JSON or other things, and it compiles to binary, compiles to Clojure, those kind of things. So let's run through a few commands of this. So here's the help. Those are the things it does. Okay, we saw that run. We saw that compile. So here's a spec example. This shouldn't be executable because it's right off the spec. It's before YAMLScript. So let's see what happens when we try to. So we can load it with a -L, and it'll just load as JSON. But we can actually have the output be in nicely formatted JSON or YAML or stuff like that. So it's a nice little converter tool if you want to use it for that. You can pipe it to standard in, get the same thing. And you can pass it to JQ and pull stuff out and colorize it if you want. Yeah, but if you try to run this program, nothing happens because there's no code was executed, right? So running something means side effects, like you're printing something. But I added a -P because often I want to see what the last evaluated thing was. So this is actually how this data looks in Clojure's internal representation. We saw it compile. Here's a compile with a -D flag, which will show you all of the steps of compilation. So it's really easy to see. It's a 7-layer thing of transformations to go from one language to the other, and you can see what's happening at every stage until it finally gets out to your result.
You use that mode for debugging a lot?
All the time, sure. Yep. So I made a web page for you guys. It's YAMLScript.org/, it's not slash, it's /TPRC 2024. So that's a mistake. Probably just add it on here because we're in Vim. So anyway, everything that I'm saying today is there, and actually all the instructions, if you miss something, you can refer to it during the talk. So here's the simplest way to install. You just curl YAMLScript.org/install and pipe it to bash. This, if you're a non-root user, it'll put it in home.local bin and lib. It installs both the YS command and a shared library that is used to bind to other languages. It just basically curls it down from GitHub and untars it, puts it there. It will tell you if that is not in your path, it'll tell you to add it. So wherever you put it, you can use a prefix variable to put it anywhere else you want to. Sometimes those binaries don't work because of kernel issues on Linux. So on Mac, it almost always works, but I haven't seen it fail on Mac. Some of the older Linuxes, but building it is really easy. You clone it and you type in make install. It will grab all of its dependencies, put them in temp for you. It won't actually even use your system Java if you have it, and it doesn't install any Java. It just grabs a tarball that has everything in it, puts it in temp, sets a couple environment variables, and it just works. But don't do it now because it's a 350 megabyte. I might kill the internet here. I don't want to do that during the talk. So, but you could try YS if you want. I think that would be fine. Okay, so I'm going to run this on. This is bash syntax that makes the internals write to a file and gives you the name of the file. So it's like having a little file in place there. So I'm going to try to run this, and it doesn't do anything, like I said, because there's no code. Now I'm going to try to print it, and it's actually just data, right? That's what it should be. When I load it, it prints the same thing as JSON. But if I put a bang YAMLScript /v0 in there, now it's code, and it will print hello. Also, the YS-E, this is what you want to do, and you always mean it to run code, so it just slaps a bang YAMLScript v0 at the top for you. So this is kind of an easy way to do it without having to type that out of the command line every time. This was this shows the parse statement where you can actually see the YAMLScript v0 that it slapped in there. And you can set so it determines, there's 3 modes. There's bare mode, which is regular YAML files, data mode, which you start in data, but you can switch over and execute code. And then there's code, which you can actually start executing code, but you can actually switch over to data mode. Because plain strings is what are commands, but sometimes you just want them to be YAML data. So, and it's really easy to switch those modes. I'll show that more in the next talk this afternoon. Okay. So when I compile the Clojure out of the box, it doesn't give this pretty thing. It's a little bit more verbose like this. So I recently added, and it's the only thing that's in this talk that's not shipped yet, but you can set ys_formatter to any program, and there's one called zprint that prints Clojure really nicely. And then I wrote zprint plus, which just pipes that to a couple Perl one-liners to space it out a little bit nicer. So if I do it here, that's okay, but I want a blank line between those functions. So, and this is what my little Perl one-liners look like. So, okay, let me show you some basic Clojure. Now here's actual Clojure running the number 42, and you notice it took about 1.5 seconds. There's another one called BB that's compiled like YS to, the first one used the JVM. It spun up a JVM, printed 42, and exited. This one is just immediate. And so let's run this. That gives us an error because in a Lisp, which Clojure is, the function always comes first. So you want the function to be first, and that's valid. If I try to say hello, say is not a part of the Clojure standard library. It's a part of the YAMLScript standard library, because I just can't type print line 50 times a day, you know, and I don't think you can either. So a lot of my ideas for this and shortenings of these long, horrendous things came from Perl and Raku. So, you know, you'll see that quite a bit. Just these little Perlisms popping up everywhere, because they're awesome. Here's how you define a function and call it. So we're defining a function that increments a number, and it prints 42. Okay, that's your basic Clojure. We'll look at a Clojure program here. So it's all Lisp, defining a function called fizzbuzz, takes a count. And this is like a switch statement. Range is weird because it always wants the range to be one more than what you really intended. So you always have to ink your thing. In YAMLScript, you can just say 1 ... count, and you're good. So if there's you know, I asked the Clojure guys, because I talked to these guys, and I'm like, why'd you do it that way? So it's like, oh, there's mathematical reasons. I'm like, yeah, that sucks. I never want that. So I didn't say that. But now it's on recording, so they're going to hear it. Damn it. Okay. Yeah, so this is their argv. Star command dash lines dash arg. So in YAMLScript, it's argv. And actually, there's an args-s that just, you know, if you pass a number in as standard in, it just becomes a number. It's like actually, because it's not like Perl where numbers and strings are the same thing. So, and I want it to be. So I just, the default when you define a main is you get your args parsed that way. Anyway, that's some basic Clojure stuff. And that it works. Here's the equivalent YS. I like it much better. And it also works side by side, etc. Okay. Check my time here. Great. Okay, so this is a functional language completely. It's which is pretty cool. All the data objects are immutable, but they're also extremely performant. The guy who made Clojure took 2 years off after doing 20 years of Java and said this is nuts, and he made it unnuts, made it nice, really dependable, really fast. And so when you add something to a hash, you get back another hash that shares all the data of the original hash plus the new thing. Or if you delete it, kind of the same thing. But you run into, and what this program is kind of interesting because it will show you one little gotcha when you're doing this functional stuff, because it looks like Python. VS Code thinks this is Python every time, but it's not. It's YAMLScript. So I don't know why I think so. Anyway, so this is kind of cool because I'm passing in the name of a function from the command line. It's taking an argument, and I can actually use that to look up its symbol, resolve it to the function that's defined down here, and call it. So I can just pass in the function I want to call and get the results. So in fact, without going back to the other screen, let's see if we can just, I could say ys%f1. Let's try that. Okay. So prints f1 and I got big. So what this is doing is picking a random number. Oh, sorry. So we see big and small. It's picking a number, floating number between 0 and 20 and seeing if it's bigger than 10. So that's what all these functions are doing. But the second one is a little bit weird because I'm setting size to nil, and then I say if it's bigger than 10, set size to small, or otherwise set size to big, and then print it. So you can probably guess what happens. It prints nil because if is a function. So it, when you see the Clojure, there's parens around the whole thing. So it creates something, but it doesn't put it anywhere. And size just remains nil, and that's what you get printed. So the good way to do this, one good way to do this is say size. You say the if is going to return. You make it return what you want. Assign it via a let binding to this, and then you say it. So if I do 3, I get what I want. Right? Yep. And you can make this a little less terse. So if actually takes the next two expressions, but when they get hairy, you can also put then and else in there. If there's, say, then has 3 things, you want to put a to do, then you don't want those 3 things to be, then and else in the error. So anyway, it's a little syntax. All right, so we saw that. Right, so this is not a bad thing about Lisp. It has one way to do things, and that's really good because, these Lisp people, they hate YAML. A lot of people hate YAML for different reasons, but the Lisp people really hate it, except they have to use it because it's part of, they still use GitHub and stuff. They have to use it at some level. But yeah, it doesn't have parens around everything, which is what they're used to. It's like they know where stuff starts and they know where it ends. That's a terrible way to program. I don't want to do it. Actually, I do it all day long because I'm making this thing. And it's awesome when I get into it, but I don't want to push it on. I don't want to say, hey, look at this thing. You just got to use parens, right? I know it's not going to sail very far. So I made the language so that you could still do the full parens if you want. You can do less parens, or you can do no parens, and we'll see that syntax now. Like I said, Perl's a major influencer, and who from the Raku community knows this guy Vandatiel? Is anybody from Raku here? He's on IRC at all? I think I saw him a couple days ago. Anyway, I run every decision by him. He's a language guy. He worked heavily on CoffeeScript. He's just the nicest guy, and done a ton for Raku. And he's really encouraging of things, except when he knows they're wrong, and then he tells me, and then I'm like, no, it's right. And then the next day I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's wrong. So here's some different ways that you can do things. You can do the Perl, that's YAMLScript doing it the Lisp way. But you can also switch the operator to put it in infix. And I call these yes expressions instead of s expressions from Lisp. You can take away the parens here, and in Lisp, you can add multiple numbers with a plus. So I do it this way, but what it's really compiling to is it's putting the plus at the front and then all the numbers after that. That's how plus works. But look, there's a plus underscore. It's because I have the magic YAMLScript plus. When it sees this way, you can add strings, arrays, mappings, numbers together. It looks at the arguments, which is slower, and you can still do it the other way if you need the speed, but most of the time you just want it to do what you want it to do. So I think it's really great. That plus is there in the front because if it weren't, this would be invalid YAML because it would see the string and say, what's this other stuff after the string? The plus is like an escape that says, hey, this whole thing is a string. It's kind of neat. This is interesting. It's not an error, but it is an error. I did this wrong. What it's really printing is saying, I don't recognize this as a bunch of operands separated by the same operator. So I'm just going to print 3. I'm going to print the function plus. I'm going to print 4. I'm going to print the function multiply and the number 5. So That's what you're seeing there. But this works the way you want it to. Okay, next. Okay, so this is kind of the normal way you do stuff in Lisp. I'm like, I really want the function's names to be in front. So this is another yes expression thing. Take the function name that's in the front, put it in front of the paren. The paren has to be right adjacent to it, but then it just works. So I just moved all these things, same thing. Then I'd like this dot syntax. So, and you can mix all these things, but I reverse the operands. And so now I have this, oh shoot, sorry. I don't know what happened there. I have this range 1 through 10, not 1 through 11. I'm going to drop 5 of them. So now I have 6 through 10. I'm going to reverse that. So now I have 10 through 6, and I'm going to increment each one. So what do we get? 11 through 7, yeah? And the cool thing is this is just a bunch of operands separated by the same operator. This is just another operator. This dot, this magic threading thing, is just another operator applied in the same way. So that's just kind of syntactically neat. Okay. Randenv is one of my favorites. So here in Java and in Clojure, you have to call system dot and capital S system dot environ to get this mapping of. I just put it in env because that's what I'm used to from Perl, and I think it's nice, right? And I can write these great one-liners. So I can sort my env and get a random pair, and hopefully this is not my API key. It's not. I decided I was just going to take that chance because I could change the API key probably before anybody could do much. We're not going live to the world, as far as I know. Here I'm going to take the third character of my username, INGY. It's going to be a G, and I'm going to uppercase it. Blah. This is cool. So I'm going to take all of userdict words. I'm going to slurp it in, break it into words, shuffle those words, take the first 5. That's kind of a expensive way to take a random 5 things, and then I'll join it together, capitalize the first letter, and I get counter-revolutions, tool gerrymanderings, binds, Sarnoffs, or gentle sucking, emancipated coordination courtesans, and on and on. So let's take a look at this more. So yeah, this is the same code, just broken over multiple lines. This is all one scalar in YAML, the right-hand side. It's just a multi-line scalar. Okay. And it still works the same. Yep. So, what did I say? Yeah, of course. So in YAML, you have 5 styles of scalars. You have plain, that means unquoted, double quoted, single quoted, literal. That's the here docs with the pipe in the front. And you have folded, which you should avoid. They're just, I don't know. I don't like folded, but just don't do it. That's the greater than sign. It's in there. It's hard to implement. It's buggy. Sorry. So let's take a look at this guy. So these are just strings used in different ways, and so this is code. Here I'm assigning the word, the single quoted word. Hello, if it wasn't single quoted, this would be a variable, right? Here I have a double quote around this because, no good reason, I guess. But here I'm using the double quotes because double quotes and literals support interpolation, so single quotes do not. And plain things are just commands. So yeah, you can see kind of how it works there. And we can run that and see what happens. So, dear Linnea, think about Navis next time. Love, Ingy. All right. See, it was like taking my little username and capital Ingy. That's good. Nice little touch. All right. So in Clojure and most lists, there's like 10 or 12 characters that are punctuation characters that allow anywhere in a symbol name. So you could have, plus, minus, underscore, question mark. That's a fine symbol name. I don't allow that. And the funny thing is I allow this. I allow words separated by dash. This is a fully qualified, this is a namespace in front of a symbol. I allow question mark and bang at the end because that's actually used. And I allow the operators I need. I don't allow underscores except for just underscore as a variable because that's actually used nicely as a placeholder in a few different areas. Thank you, Matt. We're halfway through. So, and we're over halfway through the slides. That's amazing, but the big stuff's coming. So Clojure in their standard library doesn't use anything different. I support everything they use. They just made their language support all this nonsense. And I'm like, I need all that nonsense for other cool stuff. So, you know, it was the right thing to do, yeah? Okay, so here's some syntax features. This isn't really a good way to see it, but all of these equals are making let bindings, which actually, this does these assignments and then puts a set of parens around this whole thing so that they stay in scope until the end of the function. We can compile it, but it's not formatted the way I'd like it to. So let's see what it looks like. Compile that. But you can see, yeah, so here's the whole let statement, and it goes all the way from here to there. And so I've defined these things. The cool thing about Lisps, and especially Clojure, is you can take any word. You can take if, defin. All of these words are valid to use in a scope. Like I can say defin equals 1, 2, 3. You know, as long as I don't need to use defin for defining things in that scope, I'm cool. So yeah, it's like even better than using sigils. You can use absolutely any word anywhere, as long as you don't need it for what its original purpose was in that scope. I love that. Multi-arity. Okay, so actually plus internally in the Clojure core is defined this way. I defined it as the keyword add, so it's kind of cool. Take 0 arguments, return 0. Take 1 argument, return it. Take 2 arguments, just add it like normal, and then take more and do a reduce on it, recursively calling this. So, and we can add these numbers. We can assign the range here, and this is kind of cool. This splats. I mean, it looks obvious. It just splats these numbers into a list of numbers, which is what this thing wants. In Lisp, you have to say apply, add, and then the array, and it splats it. So I didn't want to say apply anymore. The splat is nice. So let's see if it works. Of course it works. Well, it better work. Yeah, so we get 42 and 42. Isn't that cool? 3 through 9 adds up to 42. I like that. And you can see how it compiles. Let's look at loops. I have 2 loops here. This is the nice easy one, but this is for side effects. So you only use 4 if you're going to print something, because this loop down here, a loop, actually returns something. So but you have to do a little bit more. And Clojure doesn't have tail call optimization, thus YAMLScript doesn't have it. I don't know if I can do it because Java doesn't. And the inventor of Clojure said he would definitely add it if Java supported tail. So you have to use this recur thing in the tail position. But basically, I'm trying to get a list of pairs that I start with an empty thing, and then I'm going to take these numbers, and I'm going to take the number in the factorial and add them to the pairs over this loop. So it's functional programming. This is like, obviously a little harder, but there's no mutability going on there, which is maybe a good thing. So, and we see that's a set of numbers in their factorials. Regex, got some cool stuff from Perl here. Okay, so here I'm going to talk all the user dict words that have an A, some characters OO, some characters and a D in it, and print those. And then I'm going to find all the files in temp and look for lines that have just nothing with a slash after the temp. And if that matches. But the cool thing here was I actually used the Perl syntax here, but then somebody was watching and they're like, could you add another syntax so we don't have leaning toothpick syndrome? And I'm like, I thought about it for a while, and I'm like, hey, wait. In YAML single quoted strings, you don't need to escape anything except for the single quote with 2 single quotes, so that's going to work perfect. I just made it a function. Oops, I don't know what I did. That returns a pattern, and it works. So we'll go ahead and run that. Oops. And we get ballooned, ballyhooed, bamboozled, and we get some stuff that's laying around in my temp directory. Okay. So I'll skip over him. So I'm generating code, and that creates problems, but it also creates opportunity. I'm going to show you something that's really cool. So I rewrote I love Bash, and I rewrote the 99 bottles in Bash. Here it is, the same style, right? A little bit more verbose, but pretty clean. And let's run it. It does the same thing. Yep. OK. So Bash has a -x. So when I run this now, here's with 3, right? So I'm going to do 3 verses, but I'm going to print every command before it's executed, right? And one day I was thinking, well, if I'm generating code, I can put something in front of the code that prints everything before I eval it. I can do that because I'm compiling every time, right? So here's the same thing in YAMLScript. But look at that. I got the arguments, the return values, and everything. So now I have traceable code for free in the language. Full stop. It's awesome. Python doesn't. VS Code. Tell VS Code that. Yeah. Okay. Skip that one. Okay. All right. I wanted to do a coding exercise, but we'll go through it really fast. So we skipped this slide. Here's Rosetta code. I have about a dozen things. Everybody knows Rosetta code? It's a wiki that has 950 programming languages. No shit. Sorry. No kidding. 950 programming languages and over 1,200 programming tasks, and people code them on the wiki at their leisure. Right? So much leisure time. And it's great. I mean, Raku did this nonstop at the beginning. You know, they're like every new language wants to get a bunch of these in there to look real. And the same with YAMLScript. So I started doing this, but I wanted to take a new one that I hadn't done and show you how I port it. So there's this thing called 9 billion names of God the integer, and it prints out a tree like this. I didn't even read the description because I just wanted to port it. So so I started with the Clojure code. I just copy and pasted that into a file. And it's this file. And I will run it, and I get something that looks legit. And I just want to make sure that no matter how I change this code, I stay there, right? So go to the next one. So here, I just made the whole thing. I took the defins, and I made those keys and everything else a pair. So that's all I did was put a colon in between the defin and the body and see if that works. Yep, still works. OK. So then I did a little bit more refactoring and a little bit more. Let's just jump to the end. So I just kept refactoring this down, and now it looks beautiful. Actually, I flipped around the things and put main at the top. You can't do that in Clojure. You have to define the things before they get called, or you have to use a declare. But since I'm generating code, I just see what you did, and I throw the declares you need in the generated code. It's brilliant. So I can put them in any order I want, and I always code the main at the top. Why wouldn't you? I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't. OK, so this is kind of cool. You can compile to binary. Let's try it. But you have to have a main function in there. But this one-liner has a main function. And it says it's going to make a binary called no name, and it's going to take a couple minutes. Well, it actually does take a couple minutes. So I did it pre-hand, and I renamed it to hello. And I saw it run in as little as 3 milliseconds. There was a 5. Hello TPRC. There you go. And look at the size of the file. It's 13 megabytes. So hello world is 13 megabytes, but it's all of the runtime. That's just how it is right now. When somebody pays me enough money, I'll make it small. OK. So like I said before, it comes with a ton of stuff. I also added stuff and there's a YAML library, so you can use YAML input and output from YAMLScript, just like you would from Perl or Raku. JSON, of course. And some of the things I renamed in YS standard that were actually Clojure core ones, but I'm like, they don't use this much, like use. I want to use like Perl uses, and they like have it deprecated. So if you still want to use Clojure's used, which you don't, then you would say clj/use. So everything I replaced, you still can get access to it from the clj namespace. So this is kind of cool. So I told you this whole thing is written in Clojure. Clojure compiles to jar files, same as Java. You can use Java from Clojure, Clojure from Java as jar files. But then Oracle, who's heard of GraalVM? You really should. I mean, so it's black magic. I mean, that's what Ben said. He said it's a cheat code for software. It takes any jar and turns it into a binary executable, no JVM. So the YS that you saw there, you download it. There's no JVM involved anywhere. It's been pre-compiled using GraalVM's native image, and it's wonderful. So, and that's why it takes so long. That's why it takes a few minutes. It's doing a lot of work to analyze all of the Java, including all the core Java codes. It's like, you know, thousands and thousands of things that it has to resolve and put in the right place to make that thing. But the result is great. The one thing that's interesting is when you run something and get an error with a stack trace, I threw the stack trace option on there, you'll see all the internals that I use. I don't hide those yet. I might, but like, and down at the bottom you can see that the Java, you can see Java being invoked. There's a Java function, a lot of Clojure functions, that kind of thing. So, but it's not actually the JVM at that point. It's just these same names just propagated into this binary, right? Okay, so I have a big mono repo. Here it is. What did I want to say about it? Just that, like on your system, I said before, all you need is bash make and curl. It downloads this thing from GraalVM that has all the Java bits in it. You set 2 environment variables in the make file, not in your environment, and it just builds it and ignores it for the rest of the time. So as long as you have 350 megabytes on your machine, I guess that's a concern. Yeah, and so this release process of releasing YAMLScript, there's a lot going on because I have to build 12 binaries, put them up on GitHub releases. Then I actually bind this to 8, going on 9. There's a PR for Go. So I have to ship modules to Perl, Raku, and 7 other languages, and it's soon to be 40 other languages. That's the goal. And then I have to update the website. And so I actually had a piece of paper, and I just like went through and I did all these steps, and I'm like, I'm going to write a program, probably a bash program. And I'm like, this was my first serious YAMLScript program. And so here it is. Here's my my script to do a release. It gets called by the makefile, and it has these. It names its functions by step name so that I can actually, if something fails, I can jump back. I can set a environment variable and jump back to that step. Yeah. Anyway, I won't go through it all, but you can see that's all the various steps that I need to do that I was just describing, and it's great. It's clean, nice. And dog-fooded, so, okay. I don't have many people using it yet, but I'm hopeful. And so this one guy really loves it, and he thinks CERN should use it instead of Python. And he, CERN is the European Nuclear Energy, what would you say, Abigail? Association, Consortium, what?
Something like that.
Something like that. It's a big... They have some programming thing that's called root, which is an unfortunate name. But he took that library. I actually tried to build it on this box, and it crashed the box twice, and then I just used the Docker container. But he actually, I didn't write this, he did. He took this Python thing that he wrote, and then he converted it to YAMLScript, and it looks like pretty much identical. And then he said something nice, why YAMLScript? And I copied it into here. YAMLScript is a possible future for scientific computing. While Python is statement-based, YAMLScript is expression-based. Python is good, but will eventually be replaced by something else. C++ is fast. Anyway, so, you know, YAMLScript compiling to C++. He's bullish on that, so hopefully he's bullish. Okay, so I'm going to end with this. The importance of being Lispist. Is that a word? Okay, YAMLScript is a Lisp family language, and why is that important? Well, I'm not sure, but I have a friend I'm going to ask, so let's see. Yeah, well, it almost always says artificial intelligence first. So I thought, you know, that's the the tech du jour. So anyway, Lisp is the original artificial intelligence language, so maybe YAMLScript's good for that. Don't know. These other things, macros, I mean, from a Perl perspective, you know, Perl's biggest influence, Larry told me this in his kitchen once, was Lisp. I mean, not the parens, but everything else. I'll tell more of that in the next talk. So, yeah, a friend of mine that I used to work with at ActiveState, he started playing with LLMs a year ago, and he has determined that YAML is the best way to communicate with an LLM versus JSON or XML. So if you want to do structured data, because the LLM, it has to figure out from context on the web how to parse XML, JSON, or YAML. But the deal is you pay for this by token, and it's real money. And so if you're using this en masse, you can save thousands of dollars, but we have to do some, so me and him are gonna work over the next few weeks to see if this is really viable and where it breaks down, because YAML is also the hardest to parse and get right. But I've seen other, I actually put a blog post out on the YAMLScript blog. It's the latest one you can read about. It's quite interesting. And, oh yeah, and so, did I not put a, so I wrote another YAMLScript program to query a free LLM. Let me see if sorry. No. And I called it YAMLLM. And it's, you can install it, and I canceled my ChatGPT subscription because this works from the command line. It generates pretty good code for me, better code than I ever got from, I mean, just as good as ChatGPT in my opinion, using the Llama 3 thing and Llama 3 7dB LLM. I'm all new to this. I started playing with this a week ago. So, and we're like a couple minutes, right? We're getting close? Yeah, all right, because we're gonna have time for questions, so great. It's a team effort. I listed the Perl people, including Ven. Anybody know JJ Atria from London? Yeah. Actually, Olaf told me I needed Perl bindings for this around Christmas. I was at Stratford time, and he wrote those, so I didn't even write the Perl bindings. Tony Odell, also from Raku, he wrote the Raku bindings. And Stig from the Oslo Perlmongers, he did the NixOS distribution, which, he loves NixOS. That's his YAML script. I mean, he just loves it. So anyway, he took that on. That was great. So, but it's kind of a fun project. It needs lots of help if you're unemployed. I think I talked to somebody who might be looking for some fun work to do. It's easy to join and pitch in. So yeah, I'll take questions. That's it. Breathe. Anybody got any questions? Yes.
So if you were going to try to play with this, how much Clojure do you think you need? Like, would it be better just to start building YAMLScript right away, or do you think that you really kind of need?
The question was, how much Clojure do you need to start playing with YAMLScript? Well, the docs are at yamlscript.org/doc. are halfway done. So when they're fully done, I don't think you'll need much at all. I actually try to hide the Clojureness of it until you need it. And then actually I'm gonna link to, my docs will link to all the Clojure docs for everything else, because Clojure has great docs, right? And so once you get the basic patterns, you'll get it. And I'll list the top 20 Clojure functions that you need to know in the YAMLScript docs. So I think you can get like weeks in without ever really needing the Clojure. And you'll know when you need it and it'll be easy. Yes, Curtis.
Are there any tools that you thought about writing which can take a big chunk of Clojure and automatically rewrite it into YAMLScript?
Right, so the question was, is there a reverse compiler like I just did by hand there with that? Ven said he was working on one, and of course that's a great idea, but not at the moment. Yeah.
Next question, have you thought about a name that's not YAMLScript? I know we talked about this, but.
Yeah, so that was so the question was, have I thought of a name other than YAMLScript? And I fight over this just the way we fight over Perl and Perl 5 and Perl 7 and Perl 6 and all that. It's like YAMLScript has baggage, or YAML has baggage, and associating that name is, people say it and they're like YAMLScript and they just laugh, or whatever. It's just like, what a dorky thing. I think the first one is like, this will go the LinkedIn comment, somebody wrote this will go, and these are where nice people are on LinkedIn, right? This will go down in history with brainfuck. You know, it's just like, okay. Yeah, say that in a year. Say that in 2 years.
Compliment, though.
Yeah? Oh, yeah, if you're a brainfuck aficionado, yes, it is a compliment.
Everyone knows brainfuck. No one can read it, but everyone knows it, so I think that's a compliment.
I hope that that was some readable code I showed you. So, unless you're slagging me, I don't know. But
No,
anyway.
no, no.
Okay.
I mean, it looks like brainfuck. If someone says it'll go down in history as like brainfuck, then brainfuck is really well known.
That's true.
actually a compliment.
Okay. Well, it didn't get to me. I don't let much get to me because I authored YAML, and if I did, I wouldn't be here. So, yeah. But I thought about it, but if I change it, how's it going to help? It's still YAML. They're going to see it's like it gets them maybe like 2 seconds further. So I'm keeping it. You know? Any other questions out there? No. All right, let's call it. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you.